folks. Welcome to an episode of the Artenders with Mac and Dan. I am Dan. He is Mac.
Howdy.
A wonderful review show of sorts where we look at pieces of art and we try to dissect and take a close eye into what they do, how they do it, in order to better learn and improve ourselves as artists. And that could range anything from movies to television shows to video games to music. And in this case, a sports documentary.
Oh yeah.
Last week, Mac, as you know, I picked a movie randomly from a list that I have curated on IMDb. Most of them are movies that I haven't seen.
Wait, that you've curated?
Yes.
Okay. I remember the number being 420.
Yes, blaze it. And, I mean, that was just coincidental.
Wait, so how long is the list of movies that you've made?
Oh, I mean, it's incredibly long. I've only been, collecting over the past, year or so, but it's not difficult. A lot of the time, it's oh, this movie seems good, add it to the list.
Right.
Oh, this movie seems good, add it to the list. Oh, this movie looks ostensibly bad, add it to the list. So so that's
really
what
good
the
idea.
core of the list is. So I've accumulated a stupidly large amount in that list. I think over 1,000 at this point, right? And I'm not. Let this be clear. I'm not going to finish it in my lifetime. There's no way. Maybe, hopefully, in a second lifetime at least. But this time,
If you could give info and memories and IMDb lists to your next life,
this is where you are.
how much easier everything would be.
This is where you are on this
Everything
movie
would be.
list. We are discussing a documentary directed by Billy Corben, premiered in 2009 as part of ESPN's 30 for 30 films. This series where they just have all different sorts of documentaries broadcast on ESPN. And this one is called The U. It is about the sort of growth of the University of Miami football program, primarily in the 80s, and sort of the culture and the players, of course, and what was going on, in a way in Miami too during that time. It is very, very funny that, first of all, that with my random number generator, I landed on 420 last week, and
Hilarious.
also it picked a sports documentary film,
Yeah,
and
I
then
know.
it was one about a team from Miami.
Right. Well, I was going to ask, it being a team from Miami, what
Yes.
is your relationship to this team? Because you are from Orlando and
Yes.
you follow all Miami teams.
So the thing is just what it is you become a sort of fan of a college team because you're a fan of every other team in the area. So you're I might as well be a fan of the college team that's
Right.
there per se. I mean, I only know a couple of people in my family that have actually gone to the University of Miami. And I was never really interested in college football, but I always knew growing up that the U used to be the best thing ever. And they were largely dominant for 20 some odd years, right? For the most part, especially, within the 80s. And then, a little bit beyond that, they won a couple of national championships here and there. But this documentary just primarily focuses on the development of that team, starting with Howard Schnellenberger and then to Jimmy Johnson, and then to, oh my God, his name is escaping me.
I would be shocked if
But
you were
Dennis
able to.
Erickson, I believe his name is. I think I totally screwed that up. He has the funniest looking forehead. There, I said it. I'm so sorry, Dennis. And but I wanted to get into also
There, I said it.
the meat of this podcast. But Mac, so this, and I said podcast, but whatever. Mac, this is the first time you're reviewing this documentary, because I had actually seen this documentary years and years ago. This, along with the Pony Express, which was the one about
right.
SMU and the death penalty that they received for their football program because of paying college players, which is funny because they also alluded to it a little bit here as well. And we're definitely going to get into the discussion of labor, but.
Well, I wanted to ask, so we were not supposed to watch part 2, correct?
Correct.
Good, okay, good, because I did not.
Yeah.
But apparently part 2 is about Miami's experiences with
Was Nevin Shapiro.
Right.
And the boosters that surrounded that program and eventually led to the semi-quasi demise of the program, even though, like, they were still playing football and stuff, but it was definitely not what it used to be, firstly.
Which sounds just like SMU.
And,
I don't know much about the University of Miami.
I mean, but they did not receive the death penalty, and, like, to such a point that, like, and Mac just, like, scratched the table that the microphone is on, because for those of you not watching, he did not bring the proper microphone to accompany his
head extension. There's
mic
like one
stand,
tiny piece.
like me.
A
So
mess.
it's a rookie mistake.
But I have my table.
Yeah, as he lightly taps it, and it's probably still being picked up.
Oh no! This isn't getting picked up. I promise.
Yes, but SMU got a death penalty, right? They had no football program, right? At the very least, like, the University of Miami, like, their football program can still bring in money for the university. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a huge difference for a school that definitely, feeds off of the money brought in by students, regardless of if it's tuition or football.
Right.
So that's a huge difference, as well as, like, SMU has never really been able to recover.
Yeah.
Really at all, while, like, the University of Miami has been much closer in grounds than SMU has. I mean, SMU a couple of years ago was finally, like, ranked in the nation and went to a bowl game.
Right.
And then got demolished by FAU.
Absolutely demolished. Which out of all the colleges to get demolished by, it's very funny that it's FAU.
Well, I mean, but, like, okay, so just really, now we're just talking about, UM football. Or excuse me, not UM football. Now we're talking about SMU football and how that's going to be tied into UM football. But when SMU went to FAU to play that bowl game, I mean, it was at Boca, and FAU are from Boca Raton, right? And then even though Lane Kiffin had just left, it was still Lane Kiffin's team, right? And so, like, part of the schemes and part of how that team was coached was still largely there. So SMU was basically playing an away game, in a very fresh team at that. But all the same.
So have you always been a college football fan?
No,
as well?
Even though there are really only two sports in this country, and that is football and college football. College football has never really engrossed me because I always thought watching professional football is just a better sport to watch.
Yep.
Even though there is such a more hometown, and maybe I'll catch some flack for this, but I'm going to double down and say it. This cult-like nature to college football and how
I think
college
some people
football
would take
is
pride
supported throughout the nation. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what's really interesting, I think what's really cool about this documentary and what Billy Corbin does, and I don't think there's anybody in the world that loves Miami more than Billy Corbin.
I believe that.
I mean, because there's such a thing of just, like, when an artist is so good and they can leave where they're from, but they're choosing specifically to stay there and make the art that they make about where they're from, then, like, Billy Corbin is 100% one of those individuals. And, like, he's done 537 Votes, which is on HBO, that came out like a year ago or so, and that's really good. And then he just released Cocaine Cowboys on Netflix, which is a derivative iteration of a previous Cocaine Cowboys documentary that he had made. And these are all about Miami, and sometimes they're about how Miami is actually part of the national spotlight and how they play into the national spotlight. And here, with UM football being like they call it, a microwave dynasty, right? Where it started out of nowhere, but all of a sudden they're onto the scene and they're changing just fundamentally what college football looks like.
What do you think did it?
What do I think did it? Define.
What do you think was the microwave? What do you think put the team inside of the microwave and pressed the start button?
I mean, I think it was which is, it's funny for me being a Heat fan, also bringing up this word and using it in part of this conversation, but it was this sort of growth of culture, right? And so what was happening in a way is that if you look at Howard Schnellenberger, Jimmy Johnson, and the other white guy that has a really generic name.
Dennis Erickson.
Dennis Erickson.
You got it. I was impressed that you knew all three names from the documentary.
Well, I had forgot Dennis Erickson I forgot Dennis Erickson.
I forgot Dennis Erickson. I had forgotten Dennis Erickson.
Because when you see Howard Schnellenberger and that pipe, you cannot. That's such a thing.
Yeah.
You cannot forget it. And then Jimmy Johnson is Jimmy Johnson. You know Jimmy Johnson because he used to coach for the Dallas Cowboys.
I know the hell out of Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah.
Because of Dallas.
And we all know how great of a coach Jimmy Johnson is. And then there's Dennis Erickson. It was like, oh, that's right, Dennis Erickson. And he was great too. But what was interesting about that microwave dynasty is how they made this culture. And this wasn't, and they alluded to it too in this documentary, and I thought it was good of them too, but like many other things in this documentary, I wish they really, really hit more with, that this wasn't like a dynasty run by Howard Schnellenberger or Jimmy Johnson or Dennis Erickson or anybody else who followed. This was a dynasty run entirely by the players within it.
Right.
It was like its own little syndicate, right? And it went to show because once a coach turned over, the next coach, they were able to win just as easily.
Right.
For the most part. This wasn't like they said, like a Joe Paterno or a Lou Holtz situation where like these coaches, it's their dynasties.
Yeah.
This was a sort of dynasty. It was a culture and it was a syndicate that was bred by the players. And it was run by the players, and they always had this collaboration and like work together, right? I mean, we saw so many instances of the players in this documentary working together, not only on the field but off the field. And I think that in large part gave way to this dynasty, as well as the fact of like most of those players were relatively local, and so it made this huge boom in popularity for the school and for the sport. And when you have a gigantic following, it's hard not to have a dynasty in a way, even if that dynasty is just perennial losing. It's a dynasty in a way.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's the funny thing about it is like, I started thinking back like, man, that was a really great team, and then I'm like, what team am I even talking about? And then I started thinking about all the different players, and I'm like, they all played at different times?
Well, because there's an insane amount of turnover, right? That, like, Michael Irvin, I love Michael Irvin.
Michael Irvin rocks, man.
Oh, my God. He's just watch The Longest Yard, the remake with Adam Sandler. Oh
yeah,
my God.
Yeah.
Nelly's in it, too.
Michael Irvin is, like, top 2 or 3 Dallas Cowboys players for me.
Yeah.
Growing up, loved Michael Irvin, watched everything Michael Irvin.
Oh, because he's so much fun. And you saw how much fun he was in college, too.
And that was honestly the same as Tony Romo. Even though Tony Romo never actually won, Tony Romo is freaking hilarious.
Yeah.
Highly recommend watching Tony Romo interviews.
Was it funny watching him hold his face mask as well at the right outside the end zone?
Oh, yeah.
Also, what was that?
I remember it was a Domino's pizza email. I'm not getting any, don't worry. That would be a funny bit on the show, but anyways. But yeah, no, I remember watching live Tony Romo drop the snap.
Yeah.
That sent the Seahawks. Golly, that was one of the worst days of my life.
But Michael Irvin is so much fun, and he was only there for, I think, 4 years at the University of Miami. And this was a dynasty that lasted for so long. And it's funny, I think the funniest part of this documentary was one of the former players was like, yeah, there hasn't been a dynasty ever like this. And then, I mean, this was 2009, and more or less immediately afterwards, Alabama. Nick Saban's Alabama.
Right.
Which, like, I mean, you could talk to somebody who doesn't pay attention to college football, and they'll know of Alabama because of college football.
Right.
Like, that's how prolific it was. Like, that's...
Past 10 years of University of Alabama, or best, I guess, 12 years of the Alabama football have been the best 12 years from any college team, point blank.
And scarily just dominant in a way.
No questions
Other
asked.
teams ebb and flow, and I can only imagine that what we're experiencing now with Alabama is what was experienced with the University of Miami. Oh my God, more than 20 years ago. Jesus, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
35 to 40 years ago.
And with Miami, it was crazy because there was so much professional turnover. Like, they ended up being professionals, whereas Alabama's so crazy because they already kind of are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Especially with, like, how quickly these sort of like NFL teams need rookies to perform. They basically need to be professionals the moment they step off campus.
And every single person that plays for Alabama is already playing professional level football or knows what it feels like.
Yeah.
The other big thing, like you were talking about with culture, and another reason why I don't think it had anything to do with the coaches. Not anything.
I mean, it was mostly recruiting. In a way, it was recruiting the right people, and then getting those people together to work together.
Mostly recruiting,
and then some coaching with Dennis Erickson making an entirely new, not entirely new, but revolutionary for the time offensive scheme, right? And they allude to some of that, but they focus a lot more on just individual players. Sorry,
no.
Please keep going.
But some of the most interesting recruiting that they did with the best players that they had, wasn't actually like formal coach recruiting. It was the players. It was the players recruiting players.
Recruiting players. Yeah.
There was a deleted scene that I saw on YouTube.
Oh.
That was, I wish they would have left it in because I think it has a lot to do with what we're talking about right now. And it is Lamar Thomas talking about getting recruited by Michael Irvin because Michael Irvin was about to be a senior. And he was like all over the newspapers. He was on headlines.
They talk about it how like those players were bigger celebrities and the Dolphins were the only other team during that time, but like bigger than any player on the Dolphins. And part of that was because most of them were homegrown talents.
Right. That everyone already knew them. Yeah. So Lamar Thomas was talking about how he. That he had gotten a couple calls from coaches, but like that he was kind of thinking about going to, I think it was FSU, and then, which is funny, and they talk about that a little bit. Mm-hmm. But then he got a call from Michael Irvin, and Michael was like, "Gotta come down to South Miami, and we're gonna hang out this weekend." And he was like, "I mean, all plans canceled. Like it's Michael freaking Irvin, right?"
Yeah.
And this is like a 21-year-old.
If Michael Irvin called me now, I would still do that. I would cancel any plan.
But I'm saying that no, it's even more crazy that he was already that status before he even made that
Michael Irvin was younger than us when he made that call.
Sure. And that everyone dropped what they were doing and made
mortality.
Sure. Oh, that was sad. But and so Lamar Thomas went down there and. Yeah. The conversation that he had with Michael Irvin was something along the lines of, Lamar was like, "Oh, like, are you here to like try and sway me to like come to Miami?" And Michael Irvin was like, "No, I'm trying to see if you're worthy." and he was like, "What? Are you serious?" And he was like, "Oh, yeah,
yes.
Yeah. I'm gonna go back tonight and I'm going to tell them whether or not I think that you're worth our time."
Well, I mean, like. Sports teams, professional or collegiate, even the fandoms can be cults, but the organizations and the players in them can also be cults. We don't have to like beat around the bush whether or not we approve of it or not. Totally a cult.
Yeah.
But like in the funniest way possible.
Sure.
Yeah, because they're all in a way very young adults.
And you it is because even still to this day, Michael Irvin, multiple time, Super Bowl winner. Same with Ray Lewis. Same with Ed Reed. Like all these really, really, really famous NFL athletes, right?
Rock.
Every one of them, if you were to say, "Hey, could you come down to Miami to give this talk?" would drop everything.
Yeah.
Like in their minds, they are Miami players before they are like Baltimore Ravens or Dallas Cowboys. The Broncos, whatever. Yeah. Like they don't. Miami is like that is forever going to be stamped on their brain. They're never not going to be Miami Hurricanes. And
in the same way that like Jimmy Johnson talked about in the documentary too, is like I coach here, I coach here, I coach here, and I went to this school and I played here, but my school is the University of Miami.
Right.
It's that same. It's. I think like, I mean, the word cult is in the word culture. But it's precisely that. It's the cultivation. Right. Oh my God! It's the cultivation.
Was that even intentional?
Yes.
A little bit.
It's the cultivation of the cult within the culture.
Right.
But I think that's what made it partially so revolutionary and so much of a treat for us now to look back on it.
Uh-huh.
Even though so many people at that time we're like, ooh, oh God, because they were. I mean, we're talking about America here, and we're talking about like race relations, and
Big time.
we are definitely talking about America being used to predominantly white teams from Oklahoma and Notre Dame, and then all of a sudden we had these guys from University of Miami, and they're from that area, and a good amount of them are entrenched in that quote unquote hood culture, and they express it flat out on television. Everybody's like, oh God, not with my sensibilities. Oh no, this isn't what college football is supposed to be. Even though when it's like, yeah, right. and it's absurd that like, oh, so like we can't like celebrate in a sport, we can't dance in a sport, and maybe like, of course, like some of it's gratuitous, but some of the fun of it's gratuitous too. And I think the old country hated it because of how different it was, and because they weren't fans of the U anyways.
Yeah.
And so like that was the big contributing factors to it, and also like so much. I mean, there's so much racially charged language, and I think the most unfortunate part of the documentary is how it doesn't really dive into that as much as I would like it to. I don't know if that's because of ESPN. I don't know if that's because of like Billy Corbin and what he wanted to talk about in this documentary. But what really stuck with me was, oh my God, the country was so racist against this team that it's kind of sort of blatant. And Michael Irvin says, like in this documentary, like the media did not have an agenda against us. We were bad boys and we loved being bad boys. And like, yes, that's true. It's also true that like it's when you have in the newspaper, like instead of putting their record, for the football team, they put like players as like police records, or they use like thug or gang or hood,
one of the most upsetting things that
in a way to like bring them down. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like Sean Taylor gets shot, and the first thing that the reporters on ESPN say is not, and remember, this is the first thing they say whenever they start reacting at the table. It's not like, oh, what a tragedy. It is, well, knowing that he's from Miami and knowing his record, I'm not really surprised. Yeah. That's like, aren't you worried if he's gonna be okay?
Yeah.
He just got shot.
Yeah.
In his home. Or even, and this would also be similarly fucked up, but even if because you're ESPN talking about what that means to the team.
Yeah.
What that means to the sport. But no, that makes sense, and of course, like because he's from Miami.
They alluded to it a little bit, and I think maybe it was a combination of both ESPN and Billy Corbin, right? Maybe it was a combination of ESPN not really wanting to delve into that, and Billy Corbin really wanted to highlight what made this team so special, as opposed to like how everybody hated it. You know what I'm saying? And so like I think it's a combination of both, but even there are some people that we see in the documentary. I think the big one is like Mike Francesa, who has been old for the past 50 years. And like the language that he uses of how he considers like that team unsportsmanlike and in a way disgraceful. And of course, like a lot of these people like, oh, that was the mentality of the time, but you got to also understand that some of these people are still working and still have that mentality, that there are still plenty of sports talkers and analysts that want to harken back to the days of yore when it was mostly just white guys playing the sport, because once again it attacks at sensibilities. And I did really want this documentary to hit more on the revolutionary quote attack, and quote on sensibilities, but merging that sort of like beautiful culture like to the TV screen all over America, and the fact that everybody was against it, including the NCAA, when they're just, in a way, they're just kids playing a sport,
they are.
Aren't they? And oh my God, it's these criminals. It's the Catholics versus convicts thing with Notre Dame versus the U. And then there's the questions of like unsportsmanlike conduct when nobody brought it up really with Oklahoma and Notre Dame when they used to do it, 10, 20 years prior. But then now when this team does it to the beloved Notre Dame 58-7, then there's questions of like, oh man, when are you going to let up? I can't believe you do this. Well, when it's like, no, when you play the sport, you play the sport fully. You don't toss the towel. I think like there shouldn't be a counter argument for that. Sure, you can make the argument of like, if you want to throw in the towel, sure, but there shouldn't be an argument against playing all out all the time. That's more of an indictment on the other team than it is the team that you actually are if you're winning a shit ton.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason that anyone would ever try to talk about this team being any less than like a 60s or 70s Notre Dame or like a 40s or 50s Army team or something is I don't want to say it's like just flat out racist, but it is.
It is racially charged.
It's racially charged. It is. It's and
where
also
it's like
ignorance.
It's not really
like,
on the front of mind.
Yeah.
For a good amount of people.
Right.
When it takes just a little bit of picking at it, then it's like, oh, that is racist.
Yeah. Right.
And as opposed to like nowadays, the reason why any of us would hate Alabama is because of how great they are, not because of Alabama doing anything wrong.
Right.
But like there's a lot of the national conversation was seeking any excuse to attack the University of Miami because of who they were, just players-wise, people-wise. Even though like they did so much good for that school, for themselves, for the communities that they were in, that there's so many more highlights than lowlights for that university and for that team.
I'm gonna actually send us to break with a hot with more of a reckless speculation. More of a conspiracy theory. And it is this. I think the only reason that they don't call ESPN out for all of the dumb shit that they do constantly to the University of Miami is because it is produced by ESPN.
What do you think I was talking about this whole time?
Well, no, I understand, but I'm saying that I think that there's literally no one, because I think Billy Corben tries to find someone to blame for the bad rap, but there's literally you can't blame anyone other than ESPN. I'm saying that it was talked about though, and I'm saying that the conspiracy comes in that it was
saying ESPN is more responsible than anything, as opposed to ESPN just wanting to avoid the conversation.
It was an inside job, and we need to tear down ESPN. Be right back. All right, Danny's getting a pen, and we are back. So where we left off last segment, we were talking a little bit about
5 minutes ago in real time
the conspiracy theories with ESPN. I want to take a hard left turn and go towards. I actually think it's partially culture. I agree that this team was so successful, no matter who was coaching it and no matter who was on the team.
Yeah.
I'm going to go out and say that one thing that I've learned from the documentary and that I want to take into my own life is that I think what made them so successful was their ability to have fun.
Yeah.
I mean, that is one of the only sports teams that I've seen that every single player's first priority was having a good time.
Yes.
Like whenever Jimmy Johnson is screaming at his kids or just screaming at whoever, he's not screaming at them to like do better or win. He's screaming at them and he's like, you're only going to have fun in the fourth quarter of playing if you're not tired. If you're tired, you're not going to have fun. If you are not tired, you're going to have a great time kicking ass.
Yeah.
That's why you need to do conditioning right now and why you need to run.
Yeah.
Like, that's the motivating force is hilarious. And it tells you a lot about the way that the country sees them. That in one way you could say, oh, they're trying to be jackasses. They're trying to be these insane fools for the media.
But they were just having fun in their own way.
They're not worried about anyone else. They're not worried about other teams.
When they wore fatigues to the Fiesta Bowl. And I forgot who they faced in the Fiesta Bowl, but like it's that sort of thing, when they wore fatigues to that game, when they were all in like decked out like army related, paraphernalia and uniforms, and garbs, and they were treating it as like they were going to war, and in a very serious way. They were like very focused on what they were doing, but there was also like them just kind of enjoying it in the moment in a way. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a little bit of both, right? You wouldn't be doing that if you weren't having fun.
Right.
Is the big thing. That even though they were taking it extremely, extremely seriously, which they totally were, because you can't just lackadaisically win national championships.
Yeah.
They were having so much fun in it, which allowed them then to, wear fatigues and lose that game. But in other games, like do these like crazy celebrations, run down the tunnel and have, shooting, fake guns, finger guns. And like that's what allowed them to be so different. But like, nobody was doing that before. Mm-hmm. And that's when the NCAA like came down with all of those rules of, oh yeah, you're going to celebrate a lot less. You're going to have a lot less fun. You're not allowed to have fun because, because it looks bad, and because we're the ones making money off of it. We want to make sure that our product is clean.
Right. What and we're gonna get to that in just a second.
There's no player empowerment. Yes.
I would love to get to that in just a second. But I was watching an interview with Michael Irvin that was talking about what made the Miami team so electric whenever they were actually playing, and he was talking about how that every other team that he's seen, especially every other college team, that they sometimes will have like free days in practice, or like they'll like specifically work in throughout the week times in which they can have a good time and joke around throughout the week. Like Wednesday is our like we don't run that day. We do some goofy team thing, or we're like watching like film on this day, so like we get to like eat ice cream or some shit. I don't know, whatever.
Sure.
But how he was talking about how the thing that makes that Miami team different than every other team he's ever seen is that because he was with Jimmy Johnson for like one of the years of him playing, but with every single coach, their goal was to make every single day other than Saturday a living fucking hell. And every single player every week thought to themselves, I want to quit, because they hated going to practice so much, because it was a nightmare.
Oh my God.
And you'd think that would get people not wanting to play.
Yeah.
But what it did was they kept telling the players, like, we're like focused on Saturday. And so every single day of the week was an absolute piece of shit. They get to Saturday and it's a super good time. And they're having fun like that because it's their only fucking chance to have fun all week. You know what I mean?
I didn't even think about like this sort of
like for instance,
mental conditioning into it.
Yeah, they saw.
Oh my God!
And they talked about it a tiny bit in the documentary. Like they talked about how the practices were just awful, and so like they were having such a difficult time with practices. And apparently on the first day of the very first drill on the very first day of Jimmy Johnson being the head coach. Mm-hmm. He walked out there and they started doing the drill, and then one of their guards collapsed, and he had broken his femur.
Oh my God.
And they had to cart him off the field. The second he was carted off the field, they went right back and kept doing it. They didn't pause at all. They didn't talk about it. They didn't move on to the next thing. They were just like, all right, next, let's go. and they're like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Someone just broke their femur doing this.
I mean, if we were to have the conversation right now, if we're going to talk about like mental health, this is like 101 things not to like
do. Right.
make mental health a healthy thing.
I mean, but it's what we're talking about. That's part of the brainwashing.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool.
It's a lifelong...
The cultivation of a cult within a culture.
Because whenever Michael Irvin looks back, he's not like, oh man, yeah, those days at Miami really fucked me up in the head. He's like, that's what winning looks like.
Yeah.
You know? Same with Michael Jordan. You watch Last Dance, no one is thinking, oh man, how glorious. Like, that's what everyone should be like. They're thinking, that guy's a fucking sociopath. But that's why he's
crazy.
Won.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
It's legitimately crazy.
Yeah. But one thing that you talked about a little bit earlier that I really want to get on now is, do you think, and this is the question I'm posing you, do you think that there could ever be a University of Miami again now that players can get paid, and now that there's probably going to be a separation between the paid teams and the colleges that are not paying their players?
Even though there are players being paid nowadays. Now, what does that mean? Because student athletes, they're not supposed to be paid. No. We alluded to it in the first half with the Pony Express, with SMU. The reason why they got the death penalty, and the reason why the U suffered, in like the early 2000s, because of the late 90s, early 2000s, because of all this, was because there are these things called boosters. What boosters specifically do, and they talk about it in this documentary too. Luther Campbell, Two Life Crew, was a booster. A booster is basically people who give the players, the students, money. Specifically what Luther Campbell did was he had this like bounty system, which is, I mean, totally you shouldn't do. Like, I mean, the New Orleans Saints caught flack for it like some years ago too. Like, the bounty system should not exist in this sport because it's very dangerous.
No.
But these boosters exist in order to like actually pay the players and to get the players to come to whatever school they're sort of like paying for, essentially. Totally not allowed in NCAA. Now, what they just started this year, 2021, was these things called NITs. Now, forgive my ignorance, I don't know what NITs stand for, but they are basically, thank you, they're basically means for college players to be paid kind of like outside of the school, right? Which, if you think about it, I mean, the biggest issue that these players come across, and these players still come across, is there isn't a union. There's very, very little player empowerment. And then especially when like these players bring so much revenue anyways, but you can just substitute those players for any players and they will still bring revenue to the school. Of course, like better players are going to bring more revenue, but like college football is one of the biggest sports in America. People are still going to watch and talk about and celebrate college football regardless of what's being put on the field. And because there's no collective bargaining agreement, because there's no union, they are always going to be at the whims of NCAA. We saw it a little bit last year when there were multiple players who tried to like go on strike essentially and not play during COVID. And really now they're still playing during COVID, but especially during like what felt like really a high of it was they could not work together. They could not essentially unionize. There wasn't any sort of like overarching authority figure that could represent all of the players because they're students first before athletes. And even though they bring a ridiculous amount of revenue, no, they can't be paid. They're paid in books, which is absurd. I mean, imagine like, and then college sports are unique in this way, right? I mean, we both went to school for theater, and like neither of us, when we did shows in school, we didn't expect to be paid. And I think that's partially because it wasn't like those shows were conducting a lot of revenue.
True.
I think most of those shows anyways were operating at a loss.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at college sports, they're bringing in so much money.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at the facilities at Alabama, LSU, and of course part of it's donors too. But let's not be negligent of how much money. I mean, we're talking millions and billions potentially of dollars that are being brought in, but because of how much.
Also, a different thing whenever you notice the risk that the players are taking for the colleges to get all this money.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean? Like it's one thing for us to be putting on theater in a basement. It's another thing for us to be putting our body and I wouldn't say life, but definitely body on the line, health on the line to make money.
I mean, forgive me, but there is a player a few years ago who did get paralyzed from like a not an onside kick, but it was like a kick return.
Yeah,
I think that was in college, and I don't know how he was compensated for it either. I just but I was just more just responding to like we're paying for it with lives and like to that kid. Yes. Maybe. But like he was playing football, and I assume that's what he wanted to do, right? Of course, then we could just talk about like how kick return shouldn't exist, but completely different conversation.
Truth.
But the reason why what I'm trying to get at in totality is the NCAA has such a chokehold on the entirety of collegiate sports.
Yep.
There is no way for a University of Miami from the 80s to happen again unless the players and the coach and the administration and the rest of the school and then maybe even other schools were on their side. That's the biggest thing, right? We look at it in this documentary too with the president of the school of UM at that time, Ted Foote. And Ted Foote was completely, which is funny because, in a way, the UM football team ran counterculture to what what UM wanted to be, and so then in turn Ted Foote became counterculture to what UM became, and totally did not have a pulse on anything, and was not willing to accept the reality of like who his students were and what his students like came from. He had no bearing and no understanding on who they just fundamentally were, and was completely tone deaf in every situation way, and wanted to focus on UM's academics, and found it more to be an academic school, which of course, when you're president of the school, you can't be like, this is a football school, like he was in that situation, but there was such a lack of siding with the players that it was one of those things that it was this authoritative figure that it's just a thorn in your side, but it's also another thing that those players used as ammunition to go out there and literally just wipe their asses with the ball because of how great they were. But I'm so sorry to derail in multiple different directions, but my point being is that UM during that time was lightning in a bottle. It absolutely was. Now, like we said, Alabama now is just as, if not more dominant than UM was 30 to 40 years ago. But the big difference is how much character the UM team had, and how much right now for Alabama that is Nick Saban's dynasty. 30 to 40 years ago, that was the dynasty of players. Now it's a dynasty once again belonging
Nick
to
Saban.
The coach, right?
Right.
And so that's the biggest thing. So I really
if Nick
unless
Saban
there was
left,
this crazy strike
Alabama
that
would
was
go back to being
able
normal.
to be organized, there's no way that these players could possibly be empowered enough to not play because what it takes is a lot of players making a sacrifice for themselves, and when the sacrifice is I may not be able to go to the NFL. Why make that sacrifice?
Right. Well, that was another thing that back then, and the biggest difference between now and 2021 and back then.
Yeah. Ooh,
is
nice
that
voice crack by me.
that was a sexy voice crack. Yeah. The big comparison to be made is how are you incentivizing your players to come and play, right? And yes, obviously, just like SMU, there were a bunch of schools that were illegally playing or getting boosters to pay the players.
Yeah.
And that was part of the incentive for them to play was that might be getting their mom a Mercedes Benz or something, right? But the main reason that people wanted to come to Miami is because of two main things. One, just like the Michael Irvin thing, where they're having fun.
Yeah.
They're having a good-ass time down there,
Yeah.
and you want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Just like at recess, if you see a bunch of kids playing around having a good time, you're either going to go over there or you're just going to sit and be jealous.
Yeah.
The other big one is true. The other big one is their rate of NFL players that they cranked
high
out
during that time.
Unbelievable. Some of the only teams in NCAA in college football history that over 50% of the team ended up in the NFL.
Part of that, I think,
88-01.
could be attributed to a numbers thing, right? Where Howard Schnellenberger in the documentary, rest in peace, that he said that during that time that the most, per capita of sorts, or I don't remember the terminology, but a shit ton of players, good players from Florida were going to schools outside of Florida specifically for football. Oh. And so if you just take all of those, then naturally your team is going to be elite and your team is going to go to the NFL and you have all those people in one team, of course, but I think also part of it too was what Howard Schnellenberger talked about. It's this homegrown thing of like, yeah, you're not too far from your family either. You're still, in many ways, home.
Yeah.
It's home to them.
Yeah.
And along with the fact of, during that time, Luther Campbell was a huge hip-hop icon and artist and risque. And, I mean, like, we could really dive into the morality of...
You're getting guaranteed fame. Yeah. That is the most famous you can possibly get as a college athlete.
And someone who is like just tight knit with the school that like you may be looking at. And I mean, it's the same thing now of like, I'm just going to use it in this term. But like, imagine if like Kendrick Lamar or like J. Cole was like really, really tight with a college, and like was a big contributor to like the identity of the athletics of that college.
Not the same, but like it's, for instance,
it's not exactly the same.
If you go to I mean, if you go to like the Toronto Raptors.
Oh yeah, and Drake.
You're gonna hit
and it's not exactly the same because that's like a professional team and you don't have much of a say.
But yeah, there's like a part of it like that when you're going to the team now you get to hang out with Luther freaking Campbell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you think of? I'm actually curious about this. Can you think of another direct route to fame quite like that in college or like coming out of high school? I mean, unless you're Kobe Bryant and just going straight to the pros, but like, maybe being like a starting quarterback for Alabama. But I don't even always know their names.
I mean, but it's like it's the idea of like if you're first of all, I mean, if you are good enough to join one of those teams and then you're a part of a team that's part of a national conversation, then sure. I mean, what made those beginning teams of the U so special was because they weren't part of the national conversation and all of a sudden they were. And then like, it was like, who the hell are these guys? Oh my God. They almost won a bowl with a freshman quarterback. No, they did win a bowl with a freshman quarterback, just like stuff like that. So like, so is there a more direct route to fame? No.
No.
Really
maybe
isn't.
Like Duke basketball. That's the only thing I can think of in close. But yeah, no, it's Miami football. Miami football all the way. Like that is
it's the culture thing again. It's precisely
it
the culture thing of just, and you become a local celebrity as well. At the very least, at the bare minimum, you're a local celebrity.
The FSU rap video.
I actually did not see that because that was cut from because I watched the documentary on Amazon Prime, and so I think what I saw was the DVD release, and the FSU rap video was in the original premiere. It was cut from what I saw.
Yeah,
I know of it, but I wasn't able to watch it
Watched it on YouTube.
Talk me through this?
Oh, this is great. So right before they were about to play FSU, Jimmy Johnson brings him in, and by the way, part of his whole like every day will be hell except for Saturday thing is that he found out that they started to because Friday they had to travel to wherever they were playing, or stayed in a hotel or whatever, and so on Thursdays they would party. Every single Thursday, all the kids would every time would go out and party before Jimmy Johnson got there. And so what he did is he made their like weekly team meeting, like their like conference
Thursday nights
at 10 p.m. And so,
that's really funny.
Yeah, and so one of those conferences is that he pulled them in, and he was like, guys, I got some news about a video that FSU made. And they were like, what? And so he just like takes a VHS and he puts it in the player and he presses play, and then Jimmy Johnson leaves the room. He leaves the players. He locks them in the room and he makes them watch it, and then they have to talk about it for like 30 minutes or whatever. And so it's like a 3-minute video. It's after like Luther Campbell like came out with all of his,
bunch of music
about U of M. Or UM. U of M is Michigan.
Lo mismo.
And so Deion Sanders was on this FSU team with a couple other people, but Deion Sanders is the main one, right?
Oh my God, yeah. And
they basically make a rap music video, like it's a diss track to UM. And most of it's like we're the best and like we're gonna be the champions and everything. Yeah. And then they go after like we're the kings of Florida, basically.
Yeah.
And at first they kind of thought it was like dumb and like kind of a joke, but Jimmy Johnson kept them in the room. He was like, you have to, like, I'm not gonna let you leave. And they started talking about like we need to murder them. Like we're going to go absolutely ballistic on them. And I mean, made a point of it to Deion Sanders especially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they did to Boswell or whatever.
Like and like Tim Brown as well.
Yeah.
Every single time, and of course the bounty thing isn't good, but whenever they knew that there was a cocky player that really thought they were the shit.
Oh yeah, they were like, okay, we're gonna knock him out.
Yeah, they were like, that's the guy.
Yeah,
that guy's not gonna do anything.
But it's like, it's crazy. Like I just hit the shit out
Party
of my
foul
with my goddamn knee. Yowzas.
That's
but
okay.
Because I was adjusting myself and I was very excited.
At least $50.
At
fine.
least
$50 fine.
Yikes. Now, what made that so fascinating and like it's really, really funny to think about, and like of course like it's super duper culty. Yeah, but that's also what made them so great. And like it's a super tricky fine line to ride of like these coaches made their lives hell for a week, and yet or at least from our understanding, most of them come out of it respecting the shit out of those coaches, because it's also like the coaches trusted the absolute hell out of them too.
Yeah.
And then like it was what made that decade, that dynasty so much of a treat as well was it's to hit on you saying how much fun they were having, but they were playing the game as a game. It was a game. This sport, right? This career, whatever, the NCAA and then the NFL and then any other, sports league wants to paint it as this like professional sort of thing, as you see people on ESPN, these broadcasters in like blazers and ties and very elegant dresses and makeup and the whole, and very, very nice done hair, the whole 9 yards. These players never forgot they were playing a game.
Yeah.
And that's partially what made it so special. I think that's what the documentary really, really does well in. It celebrates these players so much. It lacks nuance, is the thing. And like that's like probably the biggest indictment behind it. Ladies and gentlemen, folks, we are in the 2-minute warning.
There it is.
We are suffering the 2-minute warning. The point is that this is a documentary that's very good. I think it was a lot better in 2009. I don't think it aged that well. It shows what made the players so great, but it doesn't ask you a lot of questions. It doesn't have you think about a lot more. It kind of puts his toe into the water, but it doesn't ask you anything. It doesn't ask you to do anything critically, think critically. It's just like it's kind of telling you like factoids about these lives of these players and liking nuance, and I wish I had more nuance, but this was a fun watch and you kind of understood what made this decade so special.
I agree. I wish there was a beginning, middle, end. I know that we were talking about just the University of Miami, but I kind of wish that we had maybe followed a specific coach or a specific
and it's super tricky because it's like 10 years. How do you cover like 10 plus years, you know?
But that's the thing is that I wish they would have found something that was maybe just found some sort of through line. Because the fact that I had no...
The through line was the timeline.
Right. I wish that I had some sort of person to latch onto. Maybe some sort of character that drew me through the entire thing. But like, you know... I get attached to Michael Irvin, and then once I'm not hearing about Michael Irvin anymore, I'm like, oh, well, I guess I don't care about that as much. Or I get really attached to Jimmy Johnson, and once I stop hearing Jimmy Johnson, I'm like, okay, whatever. I wish there was something that took me through the entire thing.
Which I guess is just the culture and the identity.
Yeah, which was lovely.
Sorry.
No, I agree. Now, with the last 30 seconds, the thing that we're going to be viewing for next week that I am thrilled about is on Netflix. It is a docuseries. It is on... Just like we were talking about today, it is on a cult, but it is what I believe, and I'm already giving you a sizzle serve for something that is in the future. I believe this to be the single best media made about any cult, period. It is as good as it gets. 2, 1, thank you.
What is it?
Oh. Fuck.
Well, I think it's still rolling.
Okay, yeah. Whoops.
Idiot.
I ran time. I really thought
what is it?
Wild, Wild Country.
Go stop the camera.
Failure.